Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today I got a fun and exciting episode for you guys this evening, particularly if you're a Sonic the Hedgehog fan or a Sega arcade board fan, because about 15 hours ago the first ever decompilation project for a Sega Model 2 arcade board was put up on GitHub, and it's achieved some insane results. And if you haven't noticed, 2025 is a big year for both decomps and recomps. There's so many different games that are getting worked on across the Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, and we even got the recomp of Sonic Unleashed on the Xbox 360. So this is absolutely going to be some cutting edge stuff in the future of retro gaming, and we're here to talk about it on the Sega arcade side today. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. Now I'm showing Sonic the Fighters footage because this is the first decompiled game on the Sega Model 2. If you're wondering who did this, then the username is Hilarious, its biggest Sonic fan, and that 100% tracks and checks out because they decided to decomp Sonic the Fighters, which is maybe one of those deeper cut Sonic games. But the reality is, when they talk about the GitHub notes, and I would tend to agree, there's so little actually known about the Sega Model 2 hardware on the development side of things. Yes, basically the entirety of the hardware is understood. We do have emulation for it, both on the Model 2 emulator as well as work in progress MAME versions, but as far as what SDK Sega used back in the day and the engine for these arcade games, honestly I've never really read anything that explains it fully. But if you have any assets or resources, leave me a comment down below and point me in a direction because I would be curious. Because on the Dreamcast and Naomi side of things, the Katana SDK and development kits are very well known, and they are out there, they're preserved, and a lot of collectors have them, but I've never seen anything that looks like a development kit for the Model 2 or Model 3, so it is a little bit of a black box as far as research and development is concerned. So being able to decompile a game, take a look at the source code and the assets, it's going to be huge. And if we take a look at the actual GitHub page, you're going to see a lot of detail, not just what this project is, but who worked on it. And just so you're aware, this game is a Sega Model 2B arcade board. Now there was different Model 2 releases on the hardware, just like Model 3. They just went with a lettering system here versus the step system on Model 3. But again, getting this information is going to be so important for the future. Think of it this way, not only is taking a look at the source code going to be able to help redevelop these games into recompilated versions on modern operating systems with all the trappings and quality of life improvements that come within, but it's also probably going to help the emulation front as well, but I'll get into that later on in the video. But we've seen so many decomp projects turn into recomps. What I always like to remind people, this is just halfway to a finished product as far as being able to play it in a different way is concerned. Once the game is decompiled like it is here, that means people can take a look at the code and then go ahead and port that into something different, but that still means that people need to actually want to do that work. And you'll see there's special thanks to the people that actually worked on some of the Nintendo 64 decomps and recomps as well. So I'm sure a lot of this is going to be some shared knowledge and is going to go a long way towards making this reality for other games out there. So you'll see compiling the program ROMs, the DSP and sound executable decomps are coming soon, and just how to do that. Honestly, this isn't something you're going to want to do because it doesn't render out any sort of executable that you're going to be able to double click on and play afterwards, but it's going to allow the people that can make that happen to have the materials, the source code, and the assets they need to be able to do it. If you think of something like 2 Ship to Arcadian, the Star Fox Recomp, those are all done by decompiling the actual ROMs for the game. So that's what you're going to see here again in the future. But like I always like to say, it could be next week, it could be next month, it could be next year, it could be a couple years down the road. That's something that we don't know, because a lot of times the people that work on the decomps aren't the people that work on the recomps. And trust me, I've been saying decomp and recomp a lot on the channel recently because it really is that big of a subject. And it's interesting that in 2024 and now 2025, it just seems to be heating up. We've seen a lot on the PlayStation 1 front, the Sega Saturn front, and now getting the Sega Model 2 arcade boards and some of the games decompiled. It's just absolutely impressive, and I really can't wait to see what's going to happen in the future, because this is going to bring a lot of interesting things to the forefront as far as preserving these games are concerned, because Sonic the Fighters is incredible, but it could use a little bit of new paint and some extra features. But the soundtrack, 10 out of 10, listen, and I'll be right back with more. Honestly, Sonic the Fighters has a great soundtrack, but I'm not here to say it's a hidden gem game. I'm just here to say that Sonic the Fighters is more fun and has more depth than most people give it credit for, and being able to actually play this one day in the future potentially as a recompiled version in widescreen with a good frame rate and maybe even online support if someone wanted to code that in would be absolutely outstanding. You can even sift through some of the source code here as well. They're talking about the different EEPROMs that they will be decompiling, and again, this isn't anything that you're going to want to do unless you want to make a recompiled version of Sonic the Fighters. But you'll see here 18 hours ago this all just popped up and it was definitely a surprise. But think about it this way, right now you can decompile Sonic the Fighters and that is a Model 2B game, but basically the hardware stays relatively consistent, just more powerful across the Model 2. But that means with this toolset, at least in part, other people could go in and try to decompile something like Daytona USA. Now imagine a fan recompiled version of Daytona on your PC right now, because honestly Sega does not sell this in any online front right now. You can't just go ahead and download Daytona USA. Sure, there's other ways to play it, but it is a delisted game, so having this on a modern recomp would be outstanding. Or if you think about something like MAME, some of this work could definitely help some of the MAME developers take a little bit deeper look under the hood as far as the code is concerned, and maybe glean some learnings from that and make Model 2 emulation in MAME even better. Now I'm not saying that's a guarantee, but right now this is what MAME looks like. You can definitely tell it looks different than the Model 2 emulator, but maybe taking a peek under the hood, pun very much intended, for a racing game at the source code for something like Sonic the Fighters or even a decompiled Daytona USA could actually help in the overall emulation. Or something like the House of the Dead. Right now on MAME, at least in an unofficial build that should be getting merged maybe next month, you can play the House of the Dead, but it isn't going to be perfect. But I would love to see a recompiled version of the House of the Dead, because the remake was absolute dumpster fire trash bad. But imagine the House of the Dead recompiled into 1920 by 1080 widescreen with 60 frames per second and all the modern trappings that you would get with a project like that. That's the type of stuff that really excites me about these decomp projects, because for every game that got ported off the Sega Model 2 to the home, either it's going to be an inferior port to the Sega Saturn, or it just isn't going to be as good as the actual arcade original. And that's why these decomp projects are amazing, not just from research perspectives, being able to actually better understand the Model 2 hardware and how it was developed for, but just from a playability standpoint, because everyone is super excited to play new recomps in the future. But I'm going to give you one more soundtrack sample of Sonic the Fighter, because just think about this coming out of your PC at 1920 by 1080 with maybe even some audio enhancements, and I'll be right back with a touch more. Honestly, the soundtrack to Sonic the Fighters is the hidden gem, and I love Tails' stage there going down the river on that boat, and you even get a little bit of real-time lighting when you go into some of the tunnels. But this is just exciting stuff. If you weren't around for the first generation of software emulation back in the late 90s and early 2000s, you wouldn't really realize that suddenly something just starts happening that you've never seen before. And as far as decomps and some of the recomps are concerned, it feels like that all over again. And I think you're going to see a lot more of these projects come out in 2025 and beyond, and trust me, I will talk about each and every one of them if the game is fun and I love the hardware, because people are excited about decomps and recomps, and they should be excited. This really is feeling like the future of retro gaming, not just on the preservation front, but just on the fun ways to play front, because these are all incredible games on the Sega Model 2, and maybe some point in the far future you'll be able to play the entire library as a recompiled version on your PC. But again, I'm not promising any dates whatsoever. People like to go into the comments and say, yeah, but it might take years, and the reality is the way time flies these days, it'll be here before you know it, even if it does take 28 months to actually get realized. But this is exciting, it is fun, and it really makes me optimistic that maybe someday we'll see some Sega Model 3 decomps and recomps as well. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me, if you could snap your fingers right now and make one game from the Sega Model 2 arcade board show up as a recomp, which one would it be? For me, it is a no-brainer, easy, all-day long answer. Getting the House of the Dead recompiled would be outstanding, and I would love to have it. But short of that, if you want to check out the GitHub, it is down below. If you want to decompile it, go ahead, let me know how it goes. But we're done. Play Sonic the Fighters, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.